Alright, today we're talking about facial cleansers. Welcome to the second video in my series on the Bionicle books. In the last video in the series, which is also the first one, funny that, we went over the first Bionicle book. Charming yet mediocre, it laid the groundwork for a pretty unique fictional world. But you don't get 10 years of story based on mere groundwork. You gotta build on the foundation. The world needs to get bigger. And that's exactly what's gonna happen as we introduce everyone's favorite roly-poly demolition crew, the Bohrok. This second book is part of the same little collection of books that retroactively chronicle, get it, the events of the first 3 story years of Bionicle. It was released in 2003, and as I said about the previous book, things were pretty done with this part of the story when they were making this book. Unlike the previous book, however, it doesn't delve into an original plot nearly as much. It largely reproduces the plot from the comics that came with the LEGO Brickmaster magazine. This doesn't do the book any favors. Let me say that right up front. This is going to be a different beast to discuss than the first one, but in my opinion, no less interesting. I used to really like this one when I was younger, but my thoughts on it are a bit more complicated now. Same as last time, the comics alone did not shoulder the burden of the story, but there were some online animations to show different things and tell different tales. No online game this time, but there were some retail video games out by now. They definitely existed, that's for sure. Some even went for extra credit and didn't suck that much. However, this time, I can assure you, the ending of the story year is actually in the book. Having an actual end to the story is a nice feature to have in a book. It makes things better. Speaking of things that make things better, talking about the plot of the book and a video about the book makes the video about the book better. Let's do that. The opening scene of the book is a mental conversation between 2 unnamed creatures. Clean it all, it must be cleaned. The creature stirred and opened its eyes. Clean it all, clean it all. It felt confusion. It needed to move, to clean. It must be cleaned, it must be cleaned, it must be cleaned. The creature pushed hard against the silent object surrounding it in the darkness. One of the objects shifted. Clean it all, the second being's mind offered sleepily. It must be cleaned, the first agreed, strangely relieved. It must be cleaned. All obstacles will be removed. It must be cleaned. It will be cleaned. The first creature's panic faded. It was not time yet. The time would come. Soon. But not yet. It relaxed and fell silent again. All was dark and still. For now. The monotony and vagueness of their discussion lays a mystery before us, but also incites a nameless dread. What does clean mean? What is it that must be cleaned? Why is there a time to clean it? Why do these creatures agree so literally with each other? None of these questions are answered until much later, and even then they aren't answered completely. I have more to say about this, but I'll save it for later. The Toa couldn't contain their joy. Finally, out of the darkness of the tunnels, safe from Makuta and his minions, free to enjoy the sunlight and beauty of the island. Except, I wonder what Makuta has in store for us next, Gali, Toe of Water said, and a shadow settled over the group. Way to be a downer, Gali. As the Toa discuss their victory, the ground begins to violently quake, to the point that Leiwa thinks that the Great Spirit Matanui is awakening. Oh man, reading this with hindsight, the Toa Mata are so adorable. The creature, deep in slumber, felt the trembling of the earth. It awoke. This time there was no mistake. It is time. As the thunderous vibrations rocked the cave, another creature stirred, and another. Dozens upon hundreds upon thousands. They shook off their long, deep sleep. Energy poured through them, along with absolute knowledge. Their duty waited. It was time. It must be cleaned. It is time. Clean it all. It is time. All obstacles will be removed. Clean it all. It must be cleaned. It is time. The nameless dread just intensified. Little brother, Leiwa said loudly, touching the Matoran on the shoulder. What is it? What's wrong? We're here to help you. The Matoran didn't react. He hardly seemed to pause for breath as he babbled on in the same rapid, frightened voice. Bohrok, 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 Bohrok. What's he saying? Pohatu repeated. One word, over and over, Tahu reported. Bohrok. I must return to Takoro immediately. We'll go, Tahu, Gali spoke up. Onua nodded. If there is a threat to your village, it is a threat to all of our people. Tahu accepted with a quick bow of his head. Then, slinging the Matoran over his shoulder, he gestured for the others to follow. He raced through the trees and meadows toward the foothills of the Mangai. The others were close behind him. I have just one question, Pohatu said after a few minutes. The Toa had quickly crossed the flatlands and foothills and were now climbing steadily toward the village perched near the topmost slopes of the mountain. What's that? Gali asked. What's a Bohrok? Pohatu wondered. Tahu, who was still in the lead, skidded to a halt. He stood on the edge overlooking the village of Takoro. I fear we have just found out. Nameless dread, nameless no longer. The introduction of the Bohrok, while taken straight from the comics, translates well to prose. Mystery becomes revelation, dread becomes threat. It's effective. The Bohrok have one of the best introductions of any threat in the entire Bionicle story, which is probably one reason why they've been enduring for so long. Alongside, this. On arriving at the plain in front of Takoro, the Toa see dozens of creatures, some white, some bronze, ravaging the plain in question. The narrator describes them as moving like enormous insects, which is funny in retrospect, with a few of them being much smaller than the others. Leiwa hurls his body right on in there, big shock, and according to the narrator, takes on one of the, bronze ones and gets, frozen? Whoopsie daisy. That always bothered me when I was younger. I always assumed a second Bohrok had shown up. Tahu melts him out of it, but the Bohrok that froze him ignores them and continues to ravage the plane. Gali and Leiwa combine their powers, and the first example we've seen of this outside the Kaita, and they conjure a thunderstorm, lightning striking the Bohrok and blowing them far and wide. One of them is too damaged to flee, and some green squishy thing is sticking out of its head, when suddenly one of the Turaga shows up to give us the lowdown. I didn't talk much about the Turaga last time because they weren't super relevant, but the time has come. As mentioned last time, the Turaga are elders, leaders of the Matoran villages. There are 6 Turaga, 1 for each village. Vakama, Nokama, Matau, Nuju, Wenua, and Anua. Not to be confused with Onua. Common mistake. They're leaders, they know what's up, and they have many secrets. 10 books worth of secrets. Turaga Vakama details the Bohrok's mechanisms a bit. He confirms for Pohatu that the smaller creatures are called Bohrok Va, which serve as scouts for the larger Bohrok, and informs the Toa that the squishy thing in the Bohrok is called a Krana. Not only do the Krana act as the Bohrok's brains, not only does removing a Krana render a Bohrok benign, but they are one of the only Bionicle words that's not always capitalized for whatever reason. Vakama also discusses the 6 types of Bohrok, which have elemental powers more or less mirroring those of the Toa. Tanakh use fire, Korok use ice, Galak strike from the water, Parak control stone, Nuvok control earth, but the Levak have acid venom instead of air-based powers. This makes them especially dangerous. Well, until 2003 when they figured out how to make air powers more threatening. Leiwa asks how to defeat the Bohrok, and Vakama informs the Toa that Krana come in 8 breeds from each of the 6 types of Bohrok, each breed possessing different abilities. If the Krana collect 1 of each of the 48 kinds of Krana, then they can defeat the Bohrok. Why? The knowing will come. The sentence was featured in the last book as well, and this book tries to drive it home as a theme. It's not like it's some great moral lesson or anything, but it is good advice when discussing Bionicle lore expositionally like this. Tahu tells the Toa to split up and return to their villages, to which Gali objects. Tahu explains that the Toa need to meet the Bohrok on every front. Kopaka actually agrees with this, which stuns Gali into cooperation. As they leave, Vakama warns them that the Krana can take over the mind of whoever wears them. It sure is convenient Vakama has heard all these legends. Wow, I wonder if that's a thing I can act out with my 8534 Tahu and my 8563 Tanakh. I don't know. Okay peeps, time out. Sorry to have to do this to you again, but we're going to be skipping a big chunk of the book. This time though, it's not just because it doesn't matter, but because the entire story year was handled pretty clumsily in this regard. Most of the events recorded in this book, in the animations, in the comics, etc., can all essentially be summed up as, and then they fought the Bohrok. It's a real shame too, since some really interesting things like the salvation of Lake Horo and the inventor Nuparu creating the Boxor machines from the dismantled Bohrok are completely left out in favor of pointless, though largely entertaining, Toa vs. Bohrok action. If you can have both plot and action in your book, that's great, but if you have to choose, pointless action is the wrong choice. I do recommend giving the action scenes a read if you're into that. I actually enjoy them quite a bit, but I'm giving a plot summary, and there's no plot here for the most part. There are 2 very important plot threads from this part of the book, however, and I will be going over those. Before we get into that though, I want to mention something. Most of the chapters in this section are given elemental-themed names based on the powers of the Toa and the Bohrok involved, which is charming. Except the chapter with Gali, Danger Beneath the Waves, nothing happens underwater in the entire chapter. What on Aqua Magna happened there? Anyway, let's get into the important threads. First off, Leiwa wears a Krana and gets mind-jacked. Yep. Dang it, Leiwa. It's actually handled pretty well, with 2 extremely short chapters giving us a little bit at a time as we read through the book, leaving us to wonder in the back of our minds what will happen next. I know this is literally just what the comics did, but let me give the book some credit, okay? The first snippet describes Leiwa arriving at his village, only to find all the villagers, including Turaga Matau, wearing and possessed by Orange Krana from the Levak. This is pretty messed up when you think about it, and it's much more imposing in the comics, largely due to the lack of descriptive visuals in the book. Greetings, Leiwa, the Turaga said in a monotone voice. We have been waiting for you. Turaga Matau's still creepy as heck, though. The second snippet is Leiwa simply wandering through the jungle, depicting his inner narrative. Leiwa tripped over a bula root, almost falling to the ground. He growled in anger. Clutter. It was all clutter. These roots, these trees, the leaves and the branches and the stems and the trunks, the water and the rocks. The soil, the sucking, spongy earth beneath everything else. All of it. It all had to go. Clean it. The words echoed in his head. Clear and strong and right. Clean it all. It must be cleaned. It must be cleaned, Lewa muttered. He blinked, confused by the sound of his own voice. What had he just said? It must be cleaned. What did that mean? It didn't make sense. It's a quest of some kind, he thought slowly. A duty. But I thought I already had a quest, a duty, something I was supposed to... As his thoughts trailed off into bewilderment, he was startled to notice that he now held the tree root, the one that had tripped him, in his hands. How had that happen? He glanced down and saw the gouge in the earth where the root had been ripped free. Did I do that? He wondered uncertainly. Why? Before he could come up with an answer, he found himself raising his arms. A moment later, a howling gale was whirling around him. The wind tore the bula tree straight out of the ground and tossed it aside. Clean it all, Lewa thought, moving on. It must be cleaned. This is way more effective than the first snippet, giving us an angle we simply don't get in the comics. I always like this scene, brief as it is. Finally, while Kopaka's off doing something relevant to the plot, Onua goes to look for Lewa. He finds Lewa when the Toe of Air attacks him under the control of a Krana-Za. Besides being homonymous with the Krana-Za, it also has telepathic powers and is able to read Onua's mind and predict his attacks. Lewa manages to break through the Krana's control and warn Onua of the Krana's strength, as well as halt a few attacks, but Onua tries a different tack and takes Lewa's hand. I know the Krana controls your body, he told Lewa calmly, lowering his arms to his side, but not your will. If it is so strong that it can make you harm a friend, then go ahead. I will not defend myself. But I know you, Lewa, and I know you are stronger than this parasite. Reaching out, he clasped Lewa's hand in his own. He stared into his friend's eyes, looking past the sickly reddish glow of the Krana mask, searching for the real Lewa beneath. You are a Toa, Onua finished simply. Prove yourself worthy of the name. And he waited to see what would happen. As we see in the comics, and is described later, Lewa breaks free from the Krana's control, but is a bit messed up afterwards. Side note, Lewa was also mind-jacked by an infected mask last story here, but I guess it's not relevant for whatever reason. Dang it, Lewa. Elsewhere in the land of plot relevance, we're back with Chili Boy Kopaka. Kopaka sees a Tanak Va climbing down the slope of Mount Ihu toward a flat area with a bunch of boulders strewn around. Kopaka spun around just in time to avoid a noxious stream of yellowish-green liquid. The stream hit a cluster of boulders instead, and within seconds, the solid rocks had melted away to nothing but a bit of greenish steam. Acid, Kopaka thought grimly. So these are the Leevok. The green-colored Bohrok were swarming toward him, destroying everything in their path with spurts of deadly acid. Kopaka lifted his ice blade, prepared to defend himself. But the swarms had no interest in him. They moved on to the east, straight toward the line of treetops visible in the distance. They are bringing their blight to the lands of Toa Lewa, Kopaka thought. I hope he is prepared to meet them. Dramatic irony, nice. Kopaka leaps across the boulders, nearing the center of the clutter, all the while seeing more Bohrok Va and regular Bohrok enter a ring of boulders in the very middle. Wondering what they could all be doing in there, he looks through the central ring to investigate. He stepped through himself, ice blade at the ready, but it fell to his side in shock when he saw it. A tunnel. Not just a tunnel, but an enormous, yawning chasm in the ground. It plunged straight down into the earth, neither narrowing nor sloping, before its depths were lost in the darkness below. And all around the walls, clambering along steep channels carved into the stone, were more Bohrok. Dozens of them, no hundreds, 10 times larger than any of the swarms he'd seen. Here and there, a Bohrok Va scurried downward into the darkness, but the rest were moving in one direction. Upward. Toward the surface. Toward the helpless lands of Motunui. Kopaka gulped. This wasn't what he'd expected to find, and it changed everything. He was tempted to climb down those rough, narrow trails to search for some answers, but no. There were too many of them for Kopaka alone. He needed to find the others. He just hoped they weren't already too late. The narration of this section really works, and this scene isn't represented in the comics either. It's clear Hapka was a bit less restrained when writing this, where throughout the rest of the book she's basically just adapting the comics. It's refreshing, but the fact that it stands out this much against the rest of the book is also kind of sad. Kopaka brings Tahu to see the big fat hole, and then they passed a jagged patch of ice jutting out of the rocks just ahead. Clearly the Korok had been this way. Tahu waited until they had come even with the icy patch, then pointed his sword, blasting the ice into lava. Kopaka shot him an unreadable glance. We will be needing all of our power soon, he commented. Waste it not. Tahu scowled. Waste? The only thing wasted is your breath when you tell me what to do. Yes, it seems so, Kopaka replied icily. The Toa Fire listens to none but himself. Tahu's scowl deepened. Is that supposed to be an insult because I told you to get used to this. They explain to the other Toa that the Bohrok, despite being machines piloted by the Krana, do have a nest from which they emerge onto Motunui. Onua and Leiwa arrive, and they fill in the team on what's happened to them. Tahu wasn't sure what to say. He was used to Leiwa being the flighty one among them, the lighthearted one who never took anything seriously. Seeing him like this was unsettling, to say the least. "What happened?" he asked gruffly as the silence stretched uncomfortably. "It was the Leivok," Onua answered. "They captured the Leimatoran and infected them by replacing their own masks with Krana. And when Leiwa found them like that, well, perhaps you better tell the rest, Brother Leiwa." Leiwa looked uncomfortable. They told me it was a physical entrapment only. They needed the strength of a Toa to off-mask the Krana from their faces. I believe them. Why should I not? It is not in the nature of a Leimatoran to false speak. Unless in the interest of a practical joke, Tahu murmured under his breath. "Tahu! Dude! No! Dude! No!" When Leiwa looked over at him, he cleared his throat. Didn't you remember what the Turaga said? That the Krana, when worn, can steal the mind, even the mind of a Toa? "I remember that now," Leiwa admitted. "I didn't then. I was too quick-minded to help. So I leaped right into the help task. Before I knew it, my Kanohi mask was quick snatched from one side, while from the other, someone slipped the Krana over my face. By the time I caught on, it was too late. I was one of them." Tahu wasn't sure what to think. How could that have happened? He wondered uneasily. How could ordinary Matoran, even a group of them, even with the cunning of the Bohrok guiding them, overpower a Toa? He shook his head. It would not have happened had it been me. Okay, and now you're blaming victims, Tahu. Not cool. Hapka edited that, by the way. Kudos, Hapka. Nice bit of Tahu-style jerkery right there. The Toa have collected all the Krana they need to stop the Bohrok. The 6 Toa produced the Krana they all still carried. It didn't take long to determine that they collected more than enough. "That one is the Krana Za," Leiwa said, staring fixedly at one of the Krana. "That's what I was. What was infecting me, I mean." Gali glanced at him with concern. "Yes, it's what infected you," she said. "But never think that is what you were. Never think that you became the Bohrok because you didn't." "Gali is right," Pohatu put in. "Leiwa, whatever you've been through, it's time to forget about that and focus on what's ahead. We need all of our wits about us, no distractions." "Yes, all right," Tahu said impatiently, not liking to think too much about Leiwa's infection. It made him uneasy, as if something alien had suddenly come into their midst. "Now come on, let's go down to the nest and see if we can figure out what we're supposed to do with all these Krana." The Toa decide to head into the nest, as expected. "Then it's decided," Onua said. "We will challenge the Bohrok in their nest." Tahu nodded. "The Bohrok cannot be allowed to endanger our people any longer." "No," Leiwa reminded them. "The Bohrok are not the true enemy. It is the Krana we must defeat. They have a purpose, a mission. It's why they exist." Pohatu shrugged. "They can tell us all about it on their way off the island." As the Toa head down into the nest, Tahu expresses some concerns to Onua. "Keep an eye on Leiwa," Tahu murmured to his companion. "Do you think he is still influenced by the swarm?" Onua asked, glancing forward. "I don't know what to think, but nothing can be allowed to interfere with our mission." Onua chuckled. "Leiwa would say you sound like a Bohrok, my friend." Pohatu notes that the tunnel is clearly not dug by any creature, but can say no more to that effect before a door slams shut in front of the team. Separated from Tahu, they see a wall of lava pouring toward them from behind. Kopaka freezes the lava, and Pohatu and Onua try to bring the door down, but none of their physical or elemental power has any effect. "It doesn't shatter," Leiwa shouted suddenly. "It doesn't shatter because it isn't there." "What?" Pohatu gasped breathlessly. Leiwa waved his arms, a hint of his old exuberance breaking through. "There's nothing you and Onua can't bring down," he exclaimed. "So if this wall is still standing, it can't be real. Stop believing in it, and it disappears." With that, he stuck one arm straight through the solid wall. Pohatu blinked, hardly believing his eyes. How could this be? He struck at the wall, feeling the impact shake his whole body as his fists bounced off the impenetrable surface. Then he looked again at Leiwa, who disappeared halfway through the wall by this time. It couldn't be, and yet it was. The wall was nothing but an illusion. What kind of creatures are we dealing with here anyway? Pohatu wondered, a shiver of dread coursing through him. This is the first of many ultra-realistic illusions in Bionicle. They really do become a theme. After everyone goes through the knot wall, there's a big honking explosion because apparently Tahu blew up the heart of the nest by himself. How exactly this happens with no air seal? That always confused me as a kid. Remember, the wall didn't really exist. And it's never depicted in a more detailed way either. At least in the comics we got this awesome picture. Despite how important you think this would be, the narration in the book has no impact whatsoever. The floor gives way, but the Toa levitate down to find slots for the Krana to fit into. With all 48 of them in place, they unlock yet another chamber. Apparently that's why they had to collect them all or whatever. Each of the Toa stepped into the closest tunnel. Ahead, Leiwa saw a dark glow. It held a strange shape, some kind of armor. Could it be? He hurried forward and saw that he'd been right. It was a suit of armor, Exo-Toa armor. He didn't know how he knew it was called that, he just knew. More knowledge left over from the Krana that had infected him? Shrugging off the disturbing thought, he took a step closer to the armor. I suppose I better put it on, he thought, touching the smooth surface of the armor. I may need it. Soon he was outfitted in the armor. He felt new powers seeping into his limbs and smiled. Then his smile faded as he felt a tug at the edge of his mind. Clean it all. It must be cleaned. No, he muttered aloud, shaking away such shadowy thoughts. Hurrying forward, his new armor clanking softly as he moved, Leiwa wondered what he would find at the end of the tunnel. All obstacles will be removed. Leiwa hesitated. Had that thought come from his mind? Was it the remains of the Bohrok's infection? No, he muttered uncertainly. It wasn't. I didn't. You are an obstacle, the mind voice came again. You must be removed. Leiwa gasped as an enormous creature burst into view, the massive bulk of its gleaming red limbs and pearly fangs filling the tunnel. What are you? The Toa cried in surprise. This time, knowing laughter filled his mind. You know who I am, Toa of the Bohrok, the voice taunted. You know me. I am your queen. My sister, Kadok, and I rule your thoughts, your actions. No, Leiwa shouted furiously. I do know who you are, Gadok. The name had popped into his mind as if planted there. But you are sorry wrong about me. You don't rule me and you never will. With that, he lashed out furiously. But the creature before him knocked him aside easily, sending him spinning into the hard tunnel wall. You are wrong about that, Toa of Nothing, the mind voice hissed. Dead wrong. More voices started to whisper within Leiwa's head, the voices of the swarm, calling him to fulfill their destiny. Gritting his teeth, Leiwa did his best to ignore them. I have to fight back, he told himself. I am a Toa. He raised his arms, focusing his powers on the air around him, but all that came to him was a whisper of a breeze. What's happening? Leiwa wondered desperately as his voices gained in volume. What's bad wrong with me? He fell to his knees, pressing his hands against his ears. Still, the voices filled his mind. Clean it all, must be cleaned, you are an obstacle, you must be removed, you are an obstacle, remove yourself, clean it all, clean it all, clean it all, clean it all, clean it all. Help! Leiwa cried. Someone, over here, quickly, please! Kopaka rushed to his side. Leiwa was dimly aware that the Ice Toa was dressed in Exo-Toa armor of his own. Drive it back into the cavern, Kopaka said tersely. We can't fight it here. The Toa drive the Barag into the center of the room and strike as one, but now their attacks are useless. Fools, Gadok hissed in the Toa's minds. By bringing us together, you increase our power. Now Motonoi will be as it was in the before time. All that does not belong will be removed, beginning with you. The before time here references the in the time before time from the Mythos intro. But the mention of Motonui in the before time raises an interesting question. Do they mean Motonui as it was before life arrived? Do they mean Motonui as it was at the dawn of the Matoran universe, when it didn't exist yet? If this doesn't have any deeper meaning, it's just a cheesy taunt. Speaking of, don't feel too glad, Toe of Weakness, the sisters taunted Leiwa in his mind, for we have powers and will make your blood run cold. Yeah, there's a fair bit of that in Bionicle. Get used to that too. Also, do Toa have blood? The Toa get plastered with the Barag's elemental powers before they realize their rad Gundam suits hamper their elemental powers. The reason for this is never clear, but later it's revealed that Makuta had them built, so maybe it was his idea. Speaking in a meta sense, it's probably because if the Exo-Toa actually did make the Toa more powerful overall, they would probably just keep using them. However, since LEGO doesn't like to keep the same sets around for multiple years, the Toa needs some reason to not keep the Exo-Toa indefinitely. There's nothing wrong with keeping the Exo-Toa around from a story perspective, but since the impetus to sell toys exists, now we have problems. Sadly, as a result, the Exo-Toa come and go with no consequence and remain one of the most underused concepts in all of Bionicle lore, despite how pivotal they are to this scene. Also, this projectile launcher is one of the only ones in all of Bionicle that actually works reliably. At least until you wear the spring down. With their 6 elemental powers combined, the Toa form a shell around the Barag's force field, a barrier called a Toa Seal. This outpouring of energy also causes the Toa to be dumped down some tubes into a pool of a weird substance called protodermis. Specifically energized protodermis, a silvery goo with such raw power that it either transforms or destroys whatever it touches. The narration makes it seem like the combination of the elemental powers creates this stuff, but this is more apocrypha. I didn't know that at the time, and I thought 6 elements together equals wildcard juice. The Toa Fire closed his eyes, feeling the protodermis surround him. He wanted to struggle, to fight his way to the surface, but he couldn't move. An immense heat swept through his body, blood boiling and white-hot flames flickering behind his eyelids. As soon as the heat had come, it disappeared, replaced by an icy cold so deep Tahu couldn't even shiver. Within a fraction of a second, he felt himself sinking into warm, welcoming water, deep and pure. Then the water evaporated away into a howling wind that swept him around and around, until he landed on the hard earth and felt himself sinking down, down, down into the stifling depths. Finally, he hit the hard surface of a stone cliff, and behind his still closed eyes, it was as if he could see right through it until it held no mysteries. Then the stone too fell away. For a long moment, there was nothingness. You see what I mean? Protodermis, Gali thought in confusion. The mysterious substance had been mined on Motunui for years, its origins unknown. Protodermis, Tahu thought fuzzily. The substance seemed to be seeping into his mind as well as his body, making it difficult to think or move. We're swimming in Protodermis. The mysterious substance had been mined on Motunui for years, used as a source of power. Okay, we get it. The Toa emerged from the wildcard juice in new, more powerful forms, with, as far as they know, no real downsides. Up, I'll get to you later. Nothing has been lost, the Fire Toa said firmly. Protodermis has given us the power to protect our people from any danger and to heal the land. Once we were Toa, but now we are far, far more. He raised his magma sword, reveling in the power surging through him. Now and forevermore, we are the Toa Nuva. Well, most of you are now and forevermore the Toa Nuva. Also, I'm pretty sure Nuva is just Matoran for swole. Oh boy. So, that's the book. As far as overall impressions, let's start with the positive. Firstly, I really appreciate that Bionicle went into themes of mental domination and loss of personal identity this early on into the story. Most other things meant for younger audiences won't touch this stuff, but here's Bionicle bravely tackling these concepts. This is surprisingly dark, especially for an IP owned by, the people who made this. But they handle it well without sugarcoating the topic. Secondly, I was surprised by how many long-standing mysteries they established in this story here. I have mad respect for the Bionicle story team for this. The true purpose of the Bohrok, their origin, and the true significance of these events don't come full circle until 7 years later. There's even a scene in the book where the Toa ask similar questions, but they put them aside so they can do their job. Right, Gali looked at each of the other Toa in turn. So why are they trying to destroy their own land? Nobody had an answer for that. Finally, Tahu shrugged. We don't need to understand them, he pointed out, impatience welling on him like lava. We just need to stop them, so what are we waiting for? This scene has a dual purpose. Not only does it help move the plot along, but it also helps the reader put these questions aside just as the Toa have. The answers to these questions, when they come out of nowhere, and they smack you like a ton of bricks. And looking at concepts from art director Christian Faber, these answers were planned all the way back in 1999. I'll talk about this later, I'm sure, but the story team and LEGO themselves take the secrets of Bionicle very, very seriously. Mad props, guys. Finally, the clean it all mantra of the Bohrok is not only geniusly and deliberately cryptic, but instills a really effective sense of dread. However, this is something that the comics also did well, so it's not even credit I can give this book specifically, just like the lore of this story here. Kinda like the atmosphere of the Vizirac from 2005. Okay, now for problems. This book has a really disjointed narrative that just doesn't flow at all. You probably noticed that I use the comics for a majority of the visuals in this video. That's because this book is essentially just a retelling of the story from the comics. Except when it's not. This book can't decide whether to just retell the comics, like with the muttering Matoran at the beginning, or to do its own thing, like with Tahu's flavorful dialogue. Would that it were either hot or cold, but because it is lukewarm, I will spit it out of my mouth. Metaphorically. I don't recommend putting books in your mouth. Secondly, the encounter with the Bahrag. I gotta be honest, I think it's pretty weak in every depiction. The Exo-Toa just come into existence and distract from the main conflict simply because they exist and LEGO wants people to buy them. Kind of like all the characters from the original Transformers show. The Bahrag are cool though. Why does the Protodermis happen when the Bahrag are sealed? No reason? Knowing will come? Oh, give me a break. Greg hasn't even answered that on the forums yet. I will admit that later revelations make this encounter much more interesting, but without those, this scene just happens and suddenly the Toa are swole. This isn't really an issue with the book specifically, but it's a major part of the reading experience, so it deserves mention. Speaking of problems that aren't specific to the book, the collection of the Krana. I feel like using the collect all the things plot device again is really uninspired and kinda lazy. I know the relevance to the lore as a kind of failsafe against the Bohrok being awakened at the wrong time, but that failsafe could have easily been something different. That being said, in isolation, the Bohrok are really cool conceptually. I love them as a thing that exists in the lore. I just feel like the usage and timing of this plot device was poor. This book is definitely weaker than the last, to the point where I'd call it either rushed or lazy, I'm not sure which. The book has too many inconsistencies in the pacing and too many simple errors for me to consider it good. It works okay as an adaptation of the comics, but the comics weren't even that strong anyway. Just like the last book, this one was made well after its story year was finished, so I can't really blame them for being super done at this point. It's just lame that it doesn't do its own thing or justify its own existence apart from the comics. So yeah, that wasn't great. Still, there are some things to love about it, and definitely some more groundwork for the Bionicle world going forward. And next time we listen to our Tale of the Bionicle, we're going to be going over Bionicle Chronicles 3, Makuda's Revenge. This'll be fun. Before we go, let me just say, thank you to everyone who gave feedback on the first video. I'm really grateful for your support, and I'm really glad you enjoyed it. I do fully plan on going through this entire series, provided I can spare the time. Hopefully I'll do it justice. Thanks again for your support. Have a good whatever.